and healthier organization. And so Don's going to share with us today some stuff that's going to be, I think you're going to really appreciate. This morning Don was just awesome with us, and we want to thank him. So this is Don Coyhis from White Bison.
Oh, that was some kind of a meal, huh? That was a good one. Should be good. My name is Don Coyhis. I am a member of the Mohican Nation. And I belong to the Turtle Clan on my mother's side. And my Indian name is Wambi. That name was given to me when I was given the responsibility to be the keeper of a group of 100 eagle feathers. This kind of a wicked. I have, for those I mentioned this morning, I have 8 children. I have 6 girls, I have 2 boys, and 17 grandchildren. All my children are now in recovery, and through a lot of talking circles and sweats and ceremonies. It took a lot of years, but our family has broken that cycle of addiction. Last August 10th, I was 32 years sober. When I was about 4 years sober, by then I had a native mentor to help in my recovery program. His name was Johnny Littlencloud, and so for many, many years in my recovery, he was my mentor. And he gave me a lot of things to work on, some very simple but difficult things over a period of time. And after I got a taste of recovery, by then I had known I wasn't supposed to think for myself. But I kept having this stirring inside, and one day I asked the Creator if he would allow, could I spend the rest of my life working with our Native communities, dealing with issues of alcohol and drugs and all the things that alcohol and drug touches. And so my wish was granted, because I have spent the last almost 25 years working in Native communities throughout the United States and Alaska and Canada, and I still have to pinch myself that I'm allowed to do this. Johnny Littlencloud told me one time, he said, at the time my life was so messed up that I didn't, I was full of a lot of shame and not worthy and those types of things. But one of the things he told me, he said, every human being is born with a purpose. Everyone. It doesn't matter who you are, how you came in here, you are here for a purpose. And not only that, but for that purpose, he will give you the talents and the skills to fulfill that purpose. And if you're lucky enough to find it, then he said what you will find is you'll never have to work again in your life. Your work life is over. And so I found that to be true. You know, coming up here, spending time with you, this isn't work. This is an honor, you know, to be here with all of you. And every day I get to do that. And probably the greatest gift is over those years is being able to sit at the feet of the elders that I have been blessed to spend time with all over Alaska, the real old traditional people. And they took a liking to me, and so they gave me a lot of teachings and a lot of lessons for a period of time. Our organization, White Bison, we are a non-profit organization. Our board of directors composes of people from the red, yellow, black, and white. And then we balance it both with male and female. And that was at the direction when we formed Bison to do it that way. And then we also have a council of elders. So since the beginning, those elders have guided us every step of the way. And I'm still in awe of how smart our elders are. Insight that they have and timing of things in the universe and making us wait and then having us start at certain times. And but I worked with them so long, I have learned that I just listen to them. I don't question no more and keep my mind out of it. When you tell me to do something, then I just do it. That's what I learned from that. And so to be here on your sacred land is, I always am reminded that I'm a guest here on your land and your ancestors and those before when they're still here. So I always try to conduct myself in respect to that. And so White Bison was formed in 1988. Is when we finally got everything going with it. And what we're going to share here in the next hour or so is a condensed version of almost 25 years of work, 25 years of discovery. So I call it an eagle's view. It's just to fly in and tell you how it got started and what the main points are and the things that we've learned. And the things that the elders taught us over those years, which the first one was to realize that each community we go to, they need to apply their own culture to what we're doing. So we don't go in there with somebody else's culture, but we're encouraged to adapt to their own methods. Because what we found is that the earth taught each of our communities how to live in harmony with it. So those who live by the water, and the water, the fish, the salmon, and all that, it taught them how they're supposed to conduct themselves and how they're supposed to live. Well, when we go work with the desert people, then the earth taught them how to do it. So we do have different ceremonies, different songs, we have different ways of doing that. So we have learned that it has to be really individualized. Like, supposing you do some kind of a program here and you find it's very helpful to know maybe the whale ceremonies and all of that. And then, so you can't write a grant and do the research and show that it works and then take that grant out, say, to the Hopis out in the desert, you know. You can't go there and say, hey, we got a good program for you. You just got to learn the whale ceremonies. And then you guys will get sober. Of course, they're going to say, well, what the hell is a whale? And they say, oh, we got technical assistance. We're going to show you the whale teachings and all that. So we know it doesn't work that way. Each community has to have it their own way. So this will be about an approach to apply your own culture to the healing. And so that's how we're going to approach this. I shared this morning, I had worked with the community, very first one. There's around 4,000 tribal members in 2 settlements in this community, and we had an assessment done. And in this community, they found there was about 85% alcoholism above the age of 12. So everybody was drinking. Underage drinking, it was just normal. That wasn't, they got the booze right from their parents and from their relatives, so it wasn't like that talk here of underage drinking and all that. And in this community, they only had one youth graduate from high school that year. Everybody else dropped out of school. 25% of the babies being born was estimated to be FASD, fetal alcohol syndrome babies. 1/4 of the community. And those who are familiar with FAS, mom is pregnant, she drinks, and that baby can be both mentally and physically impaired for the rest of their life. Then of course, if you don't know about it, then it looks like they're problem children. Then you get into grade 7, they end up in that group, you know, the blue group, when everybody knows what that blue group is. And then drop out of school. Many of our relatives in prison are in there with FAS effect or FASD, but they enter into a system of punishment. So everyone is punishing them all the way up. It's like they don't stand a chance. So 1/4 of the tribe, it was estimated, was like that. In this tribe, the average lifespan was 37.6 years. The council all drank. That was just normal in the community. It had been for a long time. And of course, the abuses were there: sexual abuse, incest, domestic violence, elderly abuse. The elders were afraid to come out at night. They would stay in their houses. We worked in that tribe for 4 years. And as we got further into the healing work in that community, we found out that over 80% of the women in that community had been sexually abused. Out of 10 women, 8 of them had been sexually abused. It's hard to imagine. And that was normal. No one raised any flags. That's the way it had been for a long time. And we worked with them for a year and made no progress. So in my mind, I thought that I had gotten into the wrong work. I said, what are you doing here? Because prior to that time, I worked in the corporate world. And I was actually very highly trained in organizational development. They invested thousands of dollars in my training, and I was quite good at what I did. And so I remember when I left there, my boss allowed me to copy 24 hours. He said, you can take whatever information that you want. And so I thought I knew the secret to community change. So I had my cousins in on a Xerox machine, man. We were copying and duplicating things. And I got that to Indian country and I found out none of it worked. None of that stuff worked. So I was going to quit. I said I got into the wrong area. So I went to see Johnny Lippencloud to tell him I was going to quit. And he said, before you do, he said, I want you to bring together 40 elders from throughout the United States, the old people, the spiritual ones, as many as you can. And so I said, okay. So we brought together 40 elders. And those 4 days and nights that we spent there was a life-changing experience. So we described to them what had went on in this community, and it was in my belief that alcoholism, drug abuse, sexual abuse, domestic violence, diabetes, it's a very complex, complicated thing to turn around because it's all interconnected and had been for many, many years in this community. So to me, it wasn't a downward spiral. There was no way to change that. So after we told them what we were going through, they said no, they said it can be changed. And he went on to say there's two states of mind that we can be in as a human being. They said one state is a state of I don't know what I don't know. So if you think about that a while, like, if you don't know what you don't know, then you're doing what you think is right, and it don't work out. So they said, we're going to give you some information that will move you from I don't know what I don't know to now I know what I don't know. And I think that's when you go, duh, now I get it. But when you get that information, it doesn't mean anything has changed. It only means now you know what to do. You know the right thing to do. And so, what they told us is, I had told them that I had looked on Google, and actually I had written to Harvard, worked with some of those, Stanford, some of those universities to see what was the latest thing on the community change. And none of that seemed to apply or to work. So what they told us, they said, if you want to know where this information is, they said, go back to the communities and gather the elders first. And they said, you ask those elders, what was it like a long time ago? What did your grandma and grandpas tell you? So say the elder's 80, then you go back and say, what did your grandma and grandmas tell you? Now you've gone back almost a century in time, and what did your grandma and grandmas tell you? Because there was a time that our people lived at, we didn't have the problems that we have today. There was a time. And they said, that's what you want to know is, what was it like? How were people treating each other? What were their teachings? What was it that they knew about them? And so that's what we did. Is we started to find out we were looking in the wrong place. So we went back and we found out that a long time ago, this is before even the coming of the Europeans to the land here, is where they got the information was from the earth, the part where they lived on the earth. And you knew there were like the little bugs were eaten by the bigger bugs, eaten by the birds, eaten by the fish. There was a system in place, a balance system, an intelligence system that existed. And over a period of time, they knew a lot about that world that they lived in. And as they lived in that world, they created a language that could describe what that world was. And they saw the bumblebee, for example. It was very, very important to food supply. So important, as they looked at nature, they would call those entities my relatives. So they referred to them that they had a relationship with them. Like today, if you don't like a certain animal, you say, all those darn pests. Or a certain plant, you don't like it, all those darn weeds. So we tend to label things when we think it doesn't match our picture, whether it has value or not. But they didn't look at it that way. They saw everything had a purpose, and they had the right to be there. So eventually what they figured out is that there's a world you could see, and there's a world you cannot see, that they refer to as the spiritual world. And they knew a really lot about the spiritual world, about those laws, about the principles. They called, how they referenced the spiritual world, they call them teachings. Because teachings wasn't about things you could see, they were about things that they knew was in the spiritual world. And so, how they lived their life was, they lived in these two worlds, the world you could see and the world you could not see. But they knew the teachings. They knew how to pass those teachings down. So this is how our community is looked at in those days. At the root of every community was the principles, the laws, the values, the teachings. They had ceremonies at certain times to bring in the powers to help do that. And so they would take the little boys, even right from the womb, and they would train that little boy on how to become a man. We knew we were probably the most knowledgeable on the planet about the cycle of life. We were the most knowledgeable about how to raise children. The little girls, we taught them to become women. Then the women, it wasn't done yet. So the women, we taught them to become elders, same way with the men. We taught them to become elders. Then the elders, they had a job. Because by then, they were older, their database was so big that they knew a lot next to God. We would go to the elders and consult with them. Grandma, how about this? Grandpa, how about that? So we always went to these elders. Is this right? What's the right time? How do you do it? So their job then was to make sure everybody knew the teachings, and it was to pass them on. Could you imagine living in a community like this? How it must have been. No, they had problems, but they knew how to solve and resolve problems. We had peacemaker plans. So if you got in a fight with your mate and you couldn't solve it, you go to the peacemaker, take them tobacco. So they were able to solve and resolve conflict. We had no jails. During these days, there was no domestic violence. There was not sexual abuse. We didn't have teen suicides. It wasn't like that. We had problems. Not saying we didn't, but we knew how to solve and resolve those problems because nature taught us how to deal with problems. We observed nature. Most of you probably here, if you lived here, you would not have a job. Didn't need counselors, didn't need behavioral health, didn't need parenting classes. We didn't have those things because we already knew it. Everybody knew it. And so this is the way that it was for us. So this was the world that we lived in, and this was the source of our culture. So out here, you developed a culture. Dakotas, they developed a different culture. But all of them are correct. They all taught us to live in harmony with the earth. Then something happened to us. This magnificent system that we had, it actually was funded by the United States government. It was authorized by Congress. And this job was to destroy our nations. It was to destroy our communities, to delete the family structure as we knew it, and to destroy the individuals as we knew it. Year after year, millions of dollars was spent and distributed out to agencies and systems with an approval and an intent to destroy this structure. So there's something that happened to us. I'm going to smudge my computer here in about 2 minutes. But something took us from this to this. Now we all have jobs. All kind of jobs, you see, this has created. And as time went on, even more problems developed. HIV, AIDS, mental issues, prisons, suicide, drug abuse, domestic violence. The men started hurting women. Can you imagine that? Indian men started hurting Indian women. Beating them up, kicking them with their shoes, all sorts of things that men started to do. Then it got into poverty issues. Then pretty soon, single moms, the dads weren't around anymore. The moms have to do everything, raise those children. We lost the values, limited access to treatment. And then even when you just take a look at the men issues that we see, a lot of our men in jail, prisons, not home with the families, gang members, even grandpas drinking, that we see that. And so this funding that was created, we say, how could a government, how could the Congress authorize something to destroy so many communities methodically, systematically, And we say, well, how was this done? Well, one is they said, if we take away their spirituality, if we take away those teachings, because they knew that's where our power was, our knowledge was so great. Some of us even know that they outlawed those ceremonies, federal offense if you did the ceremonies, which wasn't turned around until 1978. So they said, we got to get rid of the spirituality, that's what we got to do. Because they live in harmony, so if we take the spirituality away, we'll mix them up. They will be without power, and then we can control them. So the question is, how is this done? So I want to show you a very short video. It's a documentary. I'm just going to show you the trailer of the documentary. If you want a copy of this, this is something that we just released on March 3rd. It's a 1-hour documentary. We made a 7,000-mile journey across the United States year before last. And we visited 25 boarding schools. Started at Chimawa in Salem, Oregon. Spent the day videotaping the elder stories that was there. We would drive, go to Warm Springs, make a drive. And probably as far as spiritual experiences or whatever, that was probably the most difficult time of my life, was hitting 25 boarding schools in those days. They were every other day. It was like when you go there and you hear what happened there, to see the jails that were a lot of those boarding schools. They put little kids in jails. Imagine how scared you would be to take a little one and punish them, put them down in the dark, no lights or nothing. And so we recorded these stories, and it was like sitting there over a course of a day, and it was like hearing the kids saying, there's a perpetrator here, and this is what they did to me. This is what they did. But they were older. But many times when they would tell a story, it was like they were little children again, even though they were in their 80s, 70s. But they would start to be like 5-year-old, you're hurting me, quit. They would talk like that, like it was going on from them in their mind, of which many of them had never told those stories. So I want to show you just about 5 minutes of the trailer. Then for those of you who want it, I'll tell you how to get it for free. So here we go. Documentary. One, you can go, it's on YouTube. We put it up on YouTube on March 3rd. There's over 5,000 views have happened. It's just spreading throughout the Indian country like you can't believe. The second way you can get a copy of the documentary is on our website, www.bison.org. You can also see the documentary on there. The third way is if you write to info@whitebison.org, we'll send you a free copy of the whole documentary. In 7 days, we had 1,000 requests from all over the country to send the documentary out after people saw the trailer, the story of that. And so it's increasing around 500 a day. And we believe that this story of the boarding school is now taught in United States history. Many, many people have no idea, none, that this was even going on. They have no idea that this was taking place. The genocide happened here right under everyone's nose, and nobody knows about it. And so the intent of the documentary is to let the whole world know the story of the boarding school, because as you'll see, this isn't something that happened then. It's not something in the past. What happened in the boarding school was carried down generation to generation, and is directly connected today to our teen suicides. It's It's connected to alcoholism. It's connected to the violence. It's connected to diabetes. Our researchers, thank God for Dr. Maria Grayhart, who did some of the initial research, and Dr. Duran, Eduardo Duran, who did the research that brought to our awareness that in our first years what we found out is we were working on a symptom, not the cause. Alcohol is not the cause, it's a symptom of something else. Quitting drinking doesn't do the deal. The domestic violence is not the cause, it's a symptom of something else. And for so many years, we have spent time working on the symptom. No wonder we couldn't stop this, the effects of the alcoholism, the diabetes, the violence, and all the things that it connects to. And so you're welcome to get copies of it. To copy it, you can copy it. It's on the front, I think it says Indian copyright. To be copied, borrowed, stolen, sold it, pawned it, whatever you got to do. But the idea is to get the word out so that we can get the healing and those things started. So what this thing is called now is something called historical trauma. This is very, very new information. New meaning maybe the last 15 years or so, it wasn't the last 10 years that it started to be elevated to places like organizations like us that were doing this work. And historical trauma is a combination of immense loss of traumatic events that are perpetrated upon an entire culture. This includes, this was the thing that was funded, was to take away our culture, not have it grow, not keep it, but to eradicate it. To take away the language. Because our language wasn't about communicating. Our language knew how to explain that world in which we live. Those of you who know the language know it's very difficult sometimes to translate from a native language into English. You can't do it because the words are not there. Because we had a view of being in harmony with the principles, the laws, the values, and with the earth. I was doing a training up in Minneapolis a couple of years ago now, and we had a circle going there. And there was a young girl there, maybe in her 20s. She was telling me a story. Her parents were alcoholics, so her grandma was raising her. And she said, one day I come home from school, and she said, I was so excited, and I said, Grandma, I learned a new word. And Grandma was cooking. She said, oh, what did you learn? And she spoke this word she learned, but it was an Ojibwe. And she said this word, and she said her grandma turned around and come over to her, and she grabbed her by the shoulder, she shook her. And she slapped her really hard right across the face, and she said, don't you ever say that word again. Never say that word. And she said, it surprised her because Grandma had never, ever, was always kind. And so nothing was said until that morning in the talking circle. And it just so happens Grandma was there, so as the talking stick went around, then it came to Grandma. And you could tell when she got that stick, you could tell something was going to happen. You know how that happens? I guess you hear a pin drop. Got really quiet. And this grandma was, she was one of those, she had wrinkles on her wrinkles. You know, those ones are just beautiful. You want to just take her picture and put it on a calendar. They're so beautiful. She was like that. And she was shaking, you know, and she said, I have vowed to never ever tell. She said, I gotta say something now. She said, when I was a little girl, she said, one morning the Indian agents came up with the wagon, and there was kids in there. So we come in the house, he told my parents this time, because they were taking all the kids. So they said we got in the wagon, and the only language they had was the one that they had. That was the one that they taught. They didn't learn anything else. So they got to the school, and she says a couple of days later she was talking to one of her friends. And she said the teacher come over and she motioned her, come with me. She grabbed her hand and she took her in this other room. And she said she sat me down at the table. And she said, I sat there for a while. She said, this man came in. And she said, he grabbed my hand and he put it on my table. And he pulled out a butcher knife and he chopped my little finger off. And she said, I didn't even know how come. Nobody said anything. I didn't know. And she said, they bandaged it up, and she said it just hurt. And she said that night, she said it just throbbed. And she said, I just wanted my mom. I didn't care. I just wanted my mom. I wanted to go home. And then, but she couldn't. And so a couple days later, she said she was talking again to her friend. And she said, this time when the teacher came for me, I knew what was going to happen. And I fought, she said, but she pulled me in that room. And she said, he put my hand on her and he chopped my finger off. And by this time, this grandma just crying. And just tears are coming down, just sobbing. And she looked over at her granddaughter. She says, granddaughter, she said, that's why I only have 2 fingers left on my hand. She said, when he chopped the third one off, she said, my mind connected. Speak the language, lose a finger. And she said, I never spoke that word again ever. Then she started really crying. She said, when I heard you say that word, she said, something protection inside of me. It just made me want you to never, ever speak that word again. Don't say that, because when I was little, that's what happened to me. Do you think that's a true story? Yes. Look at how quick you said yes. That's a true story. I have a videotape of a grandma in Arizona had 5 fingers chopped off. So do you see how the language stopped? There was ways that they did it so that language was not handed down to us. We were supposed to have that language handed down to us, you see, and it got stopped. And so this design, could you imagine the United States government funded and hired people who could do such a how? You had to get up in the morning and have breakfast, say, see you honey, gotta go to work, kiss everybody goodbye. And you go to the school and you could do that and then come home and have dinner and then sleep. How? I can't get it in my mind, how could this have happened? It just really happened. But his job was to take away the land, the people, a way of life, religion, and to destroy the family structure. This is the thing that happened. It started in Carlisle, and over a period of time they built 500 schools across the United States. Then in 1934 a law changed, and they were able to extend the boarding school system into the church system. So it expanded it even into more than 500 schools. So the government funded churches by areas. So they would pick like an area, South Dakota. Who wants them? Catholic, you got them. A different area, Episcopals, Methodists. They divided it up, and then they continued the boarding school strategy. Now, all the way across, there's boarding schools. Many from here went to Riverside. They went to the boarding school in Warm Springs. Many of your ancestors went to these schools, put them on buses, various ways, you see, to get them there throughout the whole United States. It was systemically designed to take your children out of the school. So you see how it broke the cycle? Instead of us teaching them what we would have taught them, they took the children away, many times by force. The first class at Carlisle, they took the children of all the leaders. There's a military strategy. Because if I have your children, I have you. You're going to do what I say. And so a removal took place of the children into these boarding schools. And what happened then was, as these little children were taught in these schools where we would teach them about healing, about spirituality, they weren't taught that. No ceremonies. They were punished if they tried to do any ceremonies, sing any of the songs. No language, the culture was taken, the teachings were taken. And in its place, what in many of these boarding schools they experienced was the beatings. Whenever they did something wrong, they were military designed schools for the most part. I am not saying every single boarding school was bad. The ones that we visited, the stories that we heard there was unbelievable. That one human being, adult, could do this to children. How they were punished was a gauntlet. They formed the kids with 2 lines. The one that had to be punished had to run through that gauntlet, and the other kids had to punish them. And if they didn't hit them hard enough, then the one that didn't hit them hard, they had to run through too. So it was here, was our first time that we started to see Indian violence. First time we started to see internal oppression. We started to see to turn one of us against the other of us. You see how that started in the boarding school? And is it still here today? And so they took you back, take away the language, the teachings, the sexual abuse, soap and mouth if they spoke the language, no culture, cut their hair. So when these little children grew up and they came home, here's where we first started to see the signs of the alcoholism. Before that, we didn't need to have alcoholism. We didn't need to hide. They were even taught to not cry. They couldn't express themselves. Many of these children were never touched, meaning hugged. Hug, you have to be hugging in order to understand about love. So in some ways, that boarding school, it took away our ability to love. We heard that time and time again on the journey. This was the first where we started to see the violence. This was the source of the sexual abuse. And it was there that we started to see the adults starting to hurt their own children. Child abuse. Doesn't that make sense? When you are abused, then there's an odd that you are going to raise those little ones like how you were raised. I mean, what other choice, in a sense, do you have? So the boarding school, the mission school, and the residential school. So here is, as they started to return back to the communities, here's where we first started to see the adults hurting children or hurting their spouses. Violence started to occur at many, many levels. This is where it started. And then, is this true? Hurt people? Hurt people? I never understood my dad. He was a boarding school, the way he punished us and things. I hated him. But it wasn't until on his deathbed, less than a year ago, I went and I spent the time with him in hospice. And he was there, he woke up one morning and I said, I was trying to get a conversation going because he'd kind of come out of a coma. And I said, Dad, I said, where was you raised? Where did you go to school? I went to the mission school. I didn't know that. I went to that mission school. Then I asked him what went on there. First he said, there's 2 times in my life I don't talk about. One is World War II. He was a medic that landed on Normandy during WW2. He said, I never talk about that. He said, the second one I don't talk about is the boarding school. He said, I never talked about that. I said, Dad, I need to know. I said, what went on there? And so I started to cry because of this work that we're in. And I asked him, I said, Dad, was there sexual abuse going on there? And he just turned his head. He said, I really don't want to talk about it. I said, who did it? And he told me, who was doing the sexual abuse there. And he said, the hard part was, he said, they always make you watch before it was your turn. And he said, it just scared you. And you had to watch because, you know, once you got to where you watched, then you knew you was going to be next. What went on there? And then I asked him, I said, Dad, I said, was you sexually abused? And he just started crying. Just crying. And he was in recovery too. And I said, Dad, what did you do with that? How did you process that? He said, I didn't. He said, all I know, he said, I screwed up my life. I screwed up your kids. He said, your kids don't even come in to see me on Father's Day. He said, I know how come. He says, because I beat you. All those things that I did to you, but he said, I didn't know how to not do that. He said, it just came out. So I crawled in that bed with him. I crawled right in bed with him. I put my hands under his neck, and I just held him. And I said, Dad, that wasn't your fault. I said, you was just a little boy. I said, you didn't cause that. And I know that moment, it really helped him to cross over to that other world without struggling, because like a forgiveness of things started to take place. But can you see how hurt people, how that works? What we do to one another as Native people in our communities, what we do to other people who come to our camps, whose earth suit may be different than yours. Make fun of them, put them down, all sorts of things we do. Or how about those of us who are more than from one camp? I'm both from the red camp, but I am from the white camp too. That's in me too. When my grandparents said, how about that? And then you know how those kind of are, like those pests, those weeds, and you know how those kind of are. We make fun right of our own. Can you see how this has come out of the boarding school? How we were taught to self-hate in a way, but didn't know how come it was. See, we knew a lot about the cycle of life in the old days. So we knew about the cycle of life, about seasons. So this is what we knew on the cycle of life. When a little baby is born, the human being grows in a 4-year cycle. The first year is like a spring, the second year like a summer, a fall, and a winter. During that season, there's certain things you're supposed to teach them, just at that age. Even the mind is designed to work in harmony with that season. When you are younger, the mind produces certain cells that allows you to learn a language. And later on, those cells go away. They say when those cells are there, you can learn 5 languages simultaneously. Don't even blink an eye. Because the mind says, teach them this. And so we're supposed to teach them. Then when they go up to 8 years old, teach them this. So we had ceremonies and certain things that we taught the little ones, whether they were boys or girls. We knew exactly what season to teach what. Of course, by the time you get 3 cycles, that's headed for puberty now. The one all adults today sweat when they get to the area of the puberty. He said, man, I hope I make it through this. And then there were ceremonies. We did these ceremonies, rites of passage, certain things we did all the way around the cycle of life. We knew that. Now these days, this is our community. So nature still says, teach them this. But when you come from that forest, like I described, what happens is we don't teach them. Teach them this. The body, the whole universe, opens up between the age up to 8 years old. Teach them this. And we don't teach them. Then prior to puberty, teach them this. We don't even know what to teach in a lot of cases. Teach them this. And all we recognize is when they get to be teenagers, what we say, I don't know the matter with these kids. They don't even know what it's like to be Indian. They got no identity. That's what's the matter with them. Both spraying with some self-esteem. Both spraying with some whatever. But that's not how it was. This is a result of what the boarding school you see took away. So these are our children, say, up to 2 years old. Do you think a baby in the womb has a reaction if there's domestic violence or screaming going on? It hasn't even been born yet. They know. It already starts in the womb. They can tell that tension. They can feel that in that tension. So when they come out, by the time they're 2 years old, these are some of the things they start to experience: developmental delays, anxiety, maybe FAS. So by the time they're 5 years old, there's issues, tantrums, they're not disciplined. You see them being carried out of Walmart under their arm. Timeout didn't work, you're kicking and screaming. So you see a behavior take place. Of course, by the time they're 6 to 8, you start to see bullying. You see that bullying take place. They're hurting one another, very, very young. And of course, by the time they're pre-teens, now they're into STDs already. Delinquency, inhalants, alcohol, drugs. Do you think hurt children hurt children? Yeah. Hurt children hurt children. Those children who are hurt, uncorrected, then it goes up, they become parents, and then they turn around and they're hurting people that they shouldn't be hurting. Because hurt children hurt children. And so by the time they're teenagers, now we got problems. We got gangs, school dropouts, mental illness, suicides, HIV/AIDS. We say we lose our children. This is what we see happens. And a lot of us are concerned about this, you see, in these days. So do you see how we started passing this down one generation to the next generation? To the next generation, until you'll have maybe a cultural center for them. You hire young people out of school, got their degree, have studied addictions counseling, all those things, and they come here and you go, what in the heck is going on here? This isn't like what you learn in school. This is another whole deal going on here, and it's very hard to understand what is going on here unless you know about historical trauma. If you understand that, then all of a sudden your skills will change, because we are passing this down from one generation to the next, and this is a cycle that needs to be broken. We have to break this. The government ain't coming. IHS ain't going to do it. DIA don't know about it. Most people don't care. And this experience, to my knowledge, the only other ones that it happened to in the massive amount that we did was the Jewish people. They understand what this is. I showed this to a group of Jewish people, and they cried. Just broke down and cried, because they understand about genocide, they understand about the studies that they've done on their own teenagers, the problems they're having with them, just like ours. Over in Israel, you see, they're studying those ones that's to do with the Holocaust. So this historical trauma, it now is very, very deep in our psyche. But it's handed down deep, you don't even know it's there anymore. It's just something that seems normal, but you don't understand it. I'll be going to a community in a couple of weeks. This community had 100 documented teenage suicide attempts in 6 months. 6 months. That community is just numb. We experience so much death in funerals. And look at what happened up here not too long ago. That's all over the internet. Everybody was crying about that Carver. It happened up here. We all understood what was going on, or even if we're not here, just spreading all the way across the country, because that's a part of what we're doing. So this historical trauma is very, very deep in our psyche. Now the way trauma works is it stays hidden for 3 or 4 generations. It doesn't surface. Then all of a sudden, 3 or 4 generations, it starts to surface. So it doesn't happen with the first generation, grandpa or dad. It's not to the son and the great-grandchildren. That's when it starts to surface. And that's why we're seeing a lot of issues around our communities we see today. It's just now surfacing in our communities, and it's playing out in the forms of suicide, alcoholism, internal oppression. We're against one another, what we shouldn't be. Domestic violence, fatherless homes, drugs, sexual abuse, and it's called historical trauma. Very, very deep, you see, in our psyche. So often it's 2 or 3 generations before it surfaces, and in order to be free of it, we know the Creator designed the human being that we're supposed to grieve. I would say the biggest issue we found in that 7,000-mile journey was unresolved grief. We don't know how to cry. We don't know what to do with death. We don't know what to do with suicides. But that's how we were taught as a result, you see, of that boarding school. Now the system is still in place. The system itself did not go away. So aren't the little trees, aren't they just watching the big trees and doing what we are doing? Is that how it works? That system didn't go away. Now what we're seeing is a lot of our teenagers are ending up in prison. I know, last year I visited 2 prisons. One had teenage native boys in prison. Teenage native girls, these are girls, teenagers, sentenced to prison, to be incarcerated. The youngest boy in the boys' prison was 11 years old. Something is wrong to have an 11-year-old Indian kid in prison. I don't care how you cut it. He's a little bitty boy. I wanted to sneak him out of there. That's what I felt. I mean, I was kind of like, you know, you get looking around and say, I wonder if they get him out of there. He's 11 years old. He doesn't belong here. And of course, our kids are ending up in treatment. They're ending up in the court system. And too many of our kids are ending up in heaven. Suicides, car accidents. You're not supposed to have a plan to go to heaven like you're a whole person like me. Then you better start getting your what together. Get a will and all that other junk you're supposed to do. Young ones, you shouldn't even have a heaven plan yet. But they're going there. So I want to show another short video. It's very, very short. And then we're going to switch and look at the recovery piece of the boarding school and how do we do that. So here we go.
Looks like rain again today. Dark clouds gather, fill the sky. Don't know how to talk to you, just know how to say goodbye.
You get it? How that works? The world in which our children live, our children did not create that world. We adults created that world for them. Then when it doesn't work out, we turn around, we blame them for MTV, call them high-risk youth. We get grants for them. We adults, we have to straighten up ourselves. If we don't straighten up ourselves, it just gets handed down, you see, generation to generation. So what we see is this generation, what needs to happen is passing this down generation to generation. This is the descendants of the boarding school. You don't need to have attended a boarding school now to have boarding school behavior effects on you. Only one of your relatives needs to be on it, and then you have that behavior because that's how it works and that's how things are passed down. So I have heard it said, more powerful than the march of mighty armies is an idea whose time has come. In 1991, we met with the elders gathering, and they started to tell us there's a new time coming. Some of them called it the healing time. They said the way that natural law works is you can only go out of balance so long. Hurt, beat, death, sexual abuse, generation to generation. There comes a point when natural law will say, I'm going to stop that because it's interested in harmony. So they said a new set of laws kick in. And all of a sudden you start to see something's happening, something's going on. So at this gathering, what they told us, they said, there's a new time coming. There's a healing time that's coming. And they said that in this healing time, the whole universe, all the natural laws will start to work in our favor. And how do we know the healing time is here? They called it the prophecies. We are in a time of the fulfillment of prophecies. So would we be able to take a quick 7-minute break? Because I know there's an interconnectedness between what we sit on and what we listen with, and one of those gets tired, the other one shuts down. So I will start again actually in 9 minutes. I'm going to grab this thing in 9 minutes, and I'm going to start talking. Now, sometimes when we experience this time, it will show up where it seems things get worse before they get better. There's a teaching that's called conflict precedes clarity. Another way of saying it is in order for anything to grow or change, it must struggle to do so first. But there's an awakening taking place because we're in a time of the fulfillment of prophecy. They told us at the elders gathering in 1991. And so I remember after they started talking about this, I asked them, they said, well, it sure doesn't seem like any healing time to me. And what they told us was this. They said a long time ago, the Creator came to Turtle Island and He divided the people into 4 directions. Red, yellow, black, and white. And He said to the people, to each of the directions, I'm going to give you some original teachings. So to the red direction, He said, you get the teachings about the earth, the plants, the animals, interconnectedness, the spirituality. The yellow direction, He said, you get the teachings about the breath, the air, the wind, meditation. The black direction, He said, you get the teachings about the water. In the white direction, you get the teachings about the fire. And you're to travel through the cycles of time, gathering this knowledge about those teachings. So the day will come, when the healing time comes, that all 4 directions need to come and sit in a circle to share those teachings. And when we do, a great healing will take place. And He said, when you first sit in that circle, He said, you'll look at one another and you'll Creator did not make 4 races, but the Creator only made 1 race. That's the human race. And they said that when we're in the womb, when we're in there, it is at that place where the Creator gives to each one of us what they call our earth suit. And so when you're born, you pop out and you got your suit. Some are red, some yellow, some black, and some white. And they said, we'll be able to look past the suit and look into the heart of those that we believe was separate. And we'll start to see things much, much different. We'll see, it doesn't matter about your suit, you will die for your children too. That you have the same problems that we are having. And they said that red direction, we cannot heal without the knowledge of the yellow, the black, and the white. The black cannot heal without the knowledge of the white, the red, and the yellow. We each have some teachings, and we have to start to share these teachings with one another. And when we do, we'll have the missing pieces. Then we will know about what we're supposed to do. The next elder that spoke, he said, well, this is how we know the healing time. As he said, old people told us, our healing time will come right after the eagle lands on the moon. So there's always watching the moon. I was working for NASA from Apollo 6 to Apollo 13. I was an engineer there, and I knew they put eagle feathers on Apollo 11, the lunar module. And so those feathers, it took off in that lunar module, it circled the Earth, and the first words ever spoken from the moon, it said, the eagle has landed. First words ever spoken. Could you imagine, say, Grandpa and a grandson are sitting there on TV eating pizza, and you're watching this lunar module coming down, and they're firing the rockets, and it lands on the moon, and then you hear this voice says, the eagle has landed. I bet your grandpa would say, I told you. Just be listening to me from now on. And they said this healing time would come. 7 days after the eagle landed on the moon, they introduced into Congress to repeal the Indian Religious Freedom Act. It took 9 years to pass it, but in 1978 they implemented where we could start doing our ceremonies again. It was against federal law prior to that. 7 days after the eagle landed on the moon, they opened up the first all-Indian treatment center ever in Arizona. So when that healing time came, these other things started to happen that we never thought would happen before, that this healing time would begin. The third elder, he said, well, this is what the people told us. They said a spider was going to come, and a spider would build a web around the whole Mother Earth. And they said when that spider was done, that there would be a web. And when that was done, they said a woman would come forward, and she'd speak on that web, and all nations would hear her voice, which today we believe is the internet. And they said the reason the woman spoke and not the man is that we're out of balance in male thought. A long time ago, about 80% of our tribes were matriarchal. So we had, those days we had clan mothers. There weren't no clan daddies. We got a Mother Earth. There never was a Father Earth. This isn't about diversity. It's about how the Creator designed the feminine, the nurturing, the earth. And he said we have to come back to those times. In 1991, of the 572 tribes, 5 of those tribes were led by women. 1 year later, once the prophecy got fulfilled, it went from 5 to 53. At the next elections, bam, 50 of our tribes were led by women. A year later, when just over 100, I think 101 of our tribes were now led by women. And so they said to the men, you've got to let those women lead. Get in there and be supportive. Because they've got to come back in balance. The colonialization process put us too much in the male thought. Because the man sees in the seen world, the woman sees in the unseen world. She knows in the unseen world. And we're too far into the science, proof, evidence. We have to come back to the intuitive side, that we have to pay attention. Then another one, they said, what you're going to see during this time, you're going to see young people with old spirits, or young kids, red, yellow, black, and white. They're going to be different. They're going to be like elders inside, these young ones. They said, just watch for them, because they're different than the rest, the young ones with the old spirits. And another one, they said, when the sun gets blocked in the 7th moon. 1 week before we met with these elders, in 1991, there was a major solar eclipse. So from that tribe, they said the healing time is here. And they told us prophecies for almost a day, enough to convince us. We says, oh my God. Doesn't it make sense that if the prophecies are true, and when they come true, there'll be a time when there's got to be somebody living there. And they said at this time, you're going to see a selection of healers, red, yellow, black, and white. And that these healers, they would have to work on themselves. You would see them working on their own stuff. And then they said when it was ready, these healers, they would start to feel called to do something. So you might be from the white direction, you say, I just feel called, I have to go work with the Native people. You might be black. I say, I really feel called, I have to go work here. And he said, this calling thing, you'd even think you were crazy, or your friends would think you were crazy. But he said these healers, they would have to respond. And we start to see an army of them form. Another community, what they said, very, very soon, a white buffalo calf will be born. Now, while all this is going on, I wasn't sober that long. I was just trying to keep my damn rest car going and enough duct tape on it and trying to heal my family. That's where I was. And then shortly after this, we received instructions that we needed to build a hoop of 100 eagle feathers. And so we built this hoop of 100 eagle feathers. And then they said, when it was done, they said, bring it up by the white buffalo calf and bring the elders from the 4 directions. So we brought elders from Africa. We found a white tribe in Finland. They're called Sami tribe. We had 27 of our nations, and we brought people from Tibet. They came over, and the ceremony took place. And when the ceremony started, this hoop, it looks like this. And when the ceremony started, that white buffalo calf got up, and it comes stood by the fence, and it watched. And they said, in this healing time, there's going to need to be 4 powers in order for this healing to take place, in order for us to get over being different races. And they said, these are the 4 powers. So they did a ceremony, and the first ones, they put in this power of forgiving. They put it in the hoop. So that hoop is constantly like a radio tower. It's pulsing that out wherever it goes. The second gift they put in was unity. Doesn't it make sense we have to work together? We have to work in a circle, like we did that yarn exercise. We have to do that. We should want to do that. It's a new time. We've got to let go of that past, the separation, and come together in unity. The third gift was healing, that each one of us have to heal ourselves. And the fourth was hope, that ability for the dream, that I can see a healed community. When you can see it, you start to get the hope. So when that was done, then they said, take this hoop on a journey, take it to the people. So we made 4 journeys across the United States. We went a north route. We started at Onondaga. We started in a longhouse 4-day ceremony. And we left there in a snowstorm. And we crossed up to the north. The first place we stopped had 35 people. By the time we got to Oregon, there were 700 people. The hoop is coming. The healing time is here. It's a mending of the hoop. So we just told them about the prophecies, what the elders said. The second journey, we had to go to Los Angeles, and the elders made us run from LA to Washington, D.C. The first journey was in a powwow band. That wasn't too bad. Cooler, powwow music. But to run across the United States, that was different. But they said a sacrifice had to take place. They said the reason that was that when the Europeans came here, they came from the east to the west. And wherever their footprints went, the web of life died. It wasn't respecting the water, the earth, hurting people. And then we spent a period of time of separation. So they said when healing time was here, the group had to go backwards in their footprints. They had to go this way. And that the group would suck the poison out of the earth. And behind the hoop, a web would get restored. We would start to think different. We would start to become aware of interconnectedness. Then the last two journeys, we realized 67% of our people lived in urban communities. So we went west of the Mississippi and we made a journey to 20 Indian urban centers, carrying the same message. Then we went east of the Mississippi to Indian urban centers, carrying the message to who is coming. The healing time is here. This is the prophecies. Because we realized that urban Indian has some cases even more done intergenerational trauma-wise than what was done on the reservations. The relocation programs and many of those other things on assimilation that have taken place. And so as we did this, we started to find these healers. They started to form circles of healing in the community. So far we've traveled over 86,000 miles with a group since 1999. And so what we found is the web does get restored all of a sudden. But doesn't it make sense? One of the spider built, they call it Facebooks. Twitter. That we can talk to one another like we never talked to one another before. Lenny, he'll take this thing, and before I could get done, go to the bathroom, come back, he's got that darn thing on YouTube. Showing it off to everybody, and he don't even ask if he can do it. He just puts it on up there. Remember last time, I wasn't even back to the hotel, and one of my daughters called him and they said, "Hey, that guy put that video on YouTube. We've all been watching it." But that's how it's supposed to be. That's how you see that this is the healing time. So we started to see these webs starting to get bigger as they put in more training, more gatherings. I mean, look at how many people show up here. Isn't this cool to see the chairs almost full? It's really cool to see it and to see our sister coming from the Seattle. We got to work together. See, it's to form these webs, to connect them. So this well-briding movement, the elders had us name it. And we didn't want to call it, first we was going to call it a sobriety movement. And they said, no, don't call it a sobriety movement. They said, for this reason, let's say you're drinking and you're a jerk. So let's say you just quit drinking. Now you're sober, but you're still a jerk. So that's not what we wanted to do. We had to do something else with it. So the only place we could find, we went to the Passamaquoddy elders, who are the keepers of the Eastern Door, and they told us the word, but it didn't exist in English, so we had to make up the word. It has very little to do with alcohol and drugs. It's a coming together emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually. It's bringing together in the same circle, healing from diabetes and obesity and mental health and FAS and alcohol and drugs, and it's the healing of the whole person, of the whole community, like this web that we had here this morning. That whole circle to be involved, to bring the resources together to heal whatever skill is needed, to heal our people. So what is it we do? Instead of historical trauma, see, the universe is designed in polarity. You have honest, dishonest, responsible, irresponsible. So if you have intergenerational trauma, what's on the other side? Well, what's on the other side is called intergenerational healing. And what is that? It's a combination of immense training, returning to ceremonies, spirituality, the cultural ways, to activate these cultural centers like this, to give the teachings to the people, but to bring back those very things that was taken away from us, and to restore that family structure. So, over a period of years, this is what the elders helped us do. We went from this, and we're working towards this type of a community. Is it possible for us to, 2011, for us to build this type of a community by coming back to those teachings. So, as we look at the intergenerational trauma, what we're passing down, would it make sense? We know we got to break the cycle, but would it make sense that there is where we break it? This generation right here, the one sitting in this room, we don't pass down a trauma. You heal yourself and you pass that healing down. Is that possible for us to do that?
Oh.
So we pass it down, that's what we pass down generation to generation, so then our little children, they won't know what we know. Now it's not easy to do this, but it's done. So when we first did this, the very first thing the elders gave us 4 laws. Over the next 23 years, they gave us 128 teachings. But at first, there was only 4. Changes from within. Changes not from tops down. All permanent and lasting change. All permanent and lasting change. All permanent and lasting change. It starts on the inside. Then it works its way out. The second law is, in order for development to occur, it must be preceded by a vision. If there's no vision, there's no development. Now, with each of these laws, there are teachings and there are principles with it. This one, this is the teaching for this law. It says, every human being, red, yellow, black, white, don't matter, that we move towards and become like that which we think about. We move towards and become like that which we think about, whether it's good for us or not. Now, if it's really true that we move towards and become like that which we think about, then is it important to think about what are we thinking about? And what is this cultural center thinking about? Oh, we can't do it, there's no way, gotta get a new board, gotta get an old board, we can't, it won't, there's no money, there's money, we can't. That's how it's going to be 6 months from now. So tribes are to move towards and become like that which they think about. What are they thinking about? Well, we've got to wait for BIA. Ain't going to not happen without BIA. One of the other things that the boarding school took away from us, and not just was unresolved grief, they took away the ability to love, but they took away our ability to dream. They said, we will dream for you. You don't have to dream no more. We're going to send your dream down in a budget. Many of you in here, you're having those dreams and you're not acting on them. Didn't we trust dreams in the old days? We had vision quests. We had many ways we knew about them. How is it you access that spiritual world? It's through the vision. It's through the dreams. Through inspiration. That's how the Creator used to talk, to inspire you. But the boarding school, they took that away. We'll dream for you. Screw them. Let's start dreaming ourselves. We know what should be in our dreams. We can't be waiting. I don't like your dreams anyway. They're weird. Let's have our own dreams, you see. The third law is, the second law is, so we define what our vision is for ourselves. How do you get it? The people have it inside of their own selves. You've got to get the people together to get the vision. Then that vision goes inside and then it works its way out. So it is these, when they took away the spirituality and they knocked us out of harmony, so what is it we do? We vision our way back. Bring back the spirituality, come back to the teachings, and then we start to see that harmony, you see, get restored again, how it was, you see, in those old days, by coming back to the culture, by coming back to the principles, laws, and the values. The third law is called the Great Learning Law, baby, youth, adult, elder. We look at our children sometimes and we say, I don't know what's the matter with these youth. They got no self-esteem, that's what's the matter with it. Those youth got no respect. And then you go to, when I was young, then you tell your darn respect story. You know, they go, you know, when you're telling them. But the elders have said this, if you want the youth to be respectful, the adults and the elders have to be respectful at the same time. You want the youth to quit drinking, the adults and the elders have to quit. You want the youth to not do drugs? The adults and elders have to quit. All at the same time, a simultaneous learning has to take place. And then they said, you must create a healing forest. Then they started giving us more teachings. They said, you cannot just go and heal a community. First, you have to show individuals how do you change you. Then, once the individuals go, then you go to the family. A series of families change. That's how community changes. It's the changing of the family that changes the community. It changes our multiple communities. It changes the nation. So we had to start to follow natural order, you see, of things. So the first thing we did was we put together a program called the Medicine of 12 Steps. So we went to the right direction, got to 12 steps. We brought it over to our direction. And the people that we trained to do this, we call them fire starters. So the fire starters, what they got to work with was these steps in a circle. So we put 3 steps in the east, 3 steps in the south, 3 steps in the west, 3 steps in the north. The ones in the east is about finding a relationship with the Creator, like a new sun, new day, new beginning. For those who are familiar, those steps about inventory yourself, look at your strengths and weaknesses. This is the direction that you make amends. You go set right with your relatives. And then the elders' teachings in the north. As soon as we put the steps in a circle, the native people says, oh, I get it now. It's during a circle. And then the teaching started to come by adding the medicinal teachings, etc. to them. And what we found out was we didn't need to necessarily go through the professional community to do this. We went right to the grassroots, right to you. And we trained you, and then we called you coaches. And then you started working with one-on-one with people, forming circles, running groups, showing tapes, workbooks, showing how to do it. And then these circles, they start to split. And then somebody says, I'll take my own group. I'll do my own circle. And so we created this series of coaches. We've trained over 4,000 coaches now, or since 1999, in our various communities across the United States. They call it peer-to-peer coaching. We had to use that because when you write a grant, that's how they want you to say it. So, what can I say? So then what we found is, as we created this medicinal 12 steps for men, the steps helped them get rid of their anger, guilt, shame, and fear. And they started to learn the culture, and people started seeing, wow, he's going back to the sweat. He's going to the Sundance. He's praying. He's using the medicine. They're starting to go back traditional. That's how they started to describe it. And of course, we have to make a different one for women, because men and women are different. Those of us in relationships, men and women, are different. So we don't heal the same. Our issues are not the same. So we had to make one totally separate, you see, for the women. This was the start of a recovering movement, bringing back the culture. And so then eventually, it developed where we had to take on the issues of the family. And so the family was next. And so we created a program, which is for sons, for fatherhood, for motherhood. Can you envision how this would work over a period of 2-3 years? Another circle, another group, another circle, another circle. And so we have written some books. You can see these on our internet at whitebison.org over that. So it is here where you start to see the first signs of return back to the old community, where the teachings, the principles, the laws, the ceremonies are now at the root level, you see, of the community. And so this is about rebuilding the family structure, like all the organizational chart. Because the org chart, what you learn when you become in the organizational chart is you learn you have territories, you have boxes, and it's yours, and nobody comes in it unless you say it to come into it. So you got mental health separate. I was watching these wolves when it was released in Yellowstone. I had a real interest. And they got out of the cage, and the first thing they found was these wolves. They started to run through the forest really fast and come to a tree, and they go very wet on that tree, and they turn the other way, and they come to a tree, They went on that tree. See, they were establishing territories. It reminds me of managers. You run down the hallway and you get past a conference room, they go, psh, and then they turn this way and they get a supply cabinet. And then you see the scratching their feet like, this is mine, you can't come in here less, whatever. So we had to figure a way to get to unorganized chart thinking for people. So we come up with this idea of the clans. How did clans work? And so we were able to create something called Coyhis clans, and we teach them circle thinking, how circles work, not how organizational charts work. And would you know, when we started teaching the spiritual part to the communities, then all of a sudden they started working together. They were able to leave their ego at the door and come and do what was right for the children. And so we started to see a big change start to take place, realizing that a coalition has the power to be the one that builds this vision for the community or the organization you see, or the people. And then we had to address our issues around our relatives in prison. When meth came out, we saw an increase of our women in prison. And so it was a big concern. So we went to an elder in Red Lake, and he's the one that gave us the Warrior Down. And so we created this program called Warrior Down, which I won't go into now. But in Boise, Idaho, of the first 50 Native men and women who came into Warrior Down, 2 years later, 49 never drank again. One slipped, but he got back into recovery. All 50 never went back to prison. What it was is they come back to a circle of people who care, and they come back to the culture. And when they come back to the culture, we're able to keep them out. We've duplicated the program in Great Falls, Montana, and we have Warrior Down for women and Warrior Down for men. We find it's best to separate those two because of all kinds of snagging strategies and stuff that goes on. I guess that's the best way to say that. So we, so kind of in closing this is a consciousness. That fall is a consciousness. You cannot see consciousness, you can just feel it. You ever go to a place that feels negative? That's consciousness. Even a stranger will come and go, whoa, what's this? Well, we got to change consciousness too. And some of you have to be strong enough to come into a group and to shake that up. Say the unsayable. We got an elephant in the living room here, folks. Everybody's seated. We're all pretending it's not here. There's a buffalo in a teepee. Duh! Raise your hands if you see the buffalo. You know, you got to say the unsayable. Dream the undreamable. You got to nudge people and say things and take care of yourself, because you'll come in your time to see a ridicule. But it's about changing the community self-talk. It's about getting this place to start talking about we're in healing. It's not there, but we're on the move. This is happening, that's happening. You see, to make those changes. And the self-talk is very, very important. Self-talk is that conversation that you are having with you right now as I'm talking to you. Now, you are not talking to you exactly what I'm saying. You are talking to you what you are thinking about what I'm saying. The one that counts is what you are saying to you, not what I'm saying to you. So we got to be really aware of how are we talking to ourselves, or about our communities, or about our organizations, because inside of us, this is where our beliefs work. Your physical senses, they're not of much value. They don't tell you the truth. What really tells you, you have like a little lens in your forehead. That's how it really works. And these senses gather information for your projection. So in other words, let's just say that you have it inside your mind that you hate this person. Then when you see them, let's say you have it in your mind, I hate this group of people, white people. Then when you see them, they might be the most kind, loving, thoughtful, caring people, but your belief inside yourself will project onto them something that isn't really true about them. Or, so we are constant. How about you and yourself? Is there ever having a part of yourself where you hate yourself? Nobody's going to say it out loud, so I'm going to go on. So somebody will come up to you and they'll say, I really think you're a beautiful person. Your self-talk will say, oh, if you only knew. You won't even be able to accept, you see, things, etc., what they say. So it's about changing our thinking. When you change the way you think, you change the way you run your life. But when you bring this thinking, you actually bring back the culture to it, now we have power. When we start bringing back the teachings and the power, and that is the source of your thinking, then the natural law starts to show up and give us the results, you see, for adding that. And so I'm going to close with this. The elders told us during this time, when we made that 7,000-mile journey, they said, we're going to give you a teaching. Recognize, acknowledge, forgive, and change. You have to recognize what trauma is. You've got to acknowledge we have it. It did happen. That abuse did happen. Fingers did get cut off. Our kids were put into prisons. And then to forgive, and then to change. And so, this intergenerational trauma, would you be willing to consider possibly the belief that you are carrying inside of you the hurt of those who come before you? Even though you didn't go to the boarding school, that grandma that was hurt 7 generations back, you are just the next generation, but you are carrying a hurt that's not your own, but of those ancestors that come before you. And when we go through this healing process, then what we realize is not only that hurt are we carrying around, but it transfers into intergenerational trauma. They're buried very deep in our psyche. Now that intergenerational trauma, it is just now surfacing, as we said. Can you see it's connected to sexual abuse? You see that? It's connected to the abuse, it's connected to alcoholism, it's connected to our issues around relationships. It's directly connected. When we heal from the trauma, we'll see a massive shift in stopping behaviors that's going on, you see, in our programs today. So this intergenerational trauma is plays a very significant role. This is what's behind alcoholism, behind suicides, it's behind depression. Many of those issues that we see that we have today, it's being carried on in that way. So the things that we shared about the unresolved grief, about taking away the ability to love, so what we did in closing is, and there will be one here in May, but we brought together the elders, clan mothers. It took us 2 years to develop a grief recovery program using culture. It's about solving unresolved grief, unresolved loss. And we train recovery coaches on how to do this, and it kind of works like this, when we train a recovery coach, they come to the community, and what they are doing is they have the process, the procedure to heal intergenerational trauma from the ancestors, plus your own, what you've gathered your own life. So this intergenerational trauma is, it attracts the hurt, it attracts the pain, it attracts the issues, and it comes right there to process. We got to process unresolved grief. We got to process death. Many things that we have stuck in our minds. And we are now going across the country training people on how to become grief coaches. Because doesn't it make sense that in order for us to heal, that we need to grieve our losses, our lost relationships, our children, car accidents, suicides, our mom. Have you ever had somebody pass on to the other side and you say, man, I wish I would have told them this. I wish I would have said this before they went. It's how do you complete those relationships even though you see they're gone in the other world, and that's what this training takes place. So these grief counselors, we train them. Then what happens is we come to a community, we do an entire community, 200-300 people, and we take through a grief process. Then out of there is where we select the people that will run the 7 trainings. So you cannot give away what you don't have. If you haven't healed yourself, you can't teach others to heal. And so out of that selection comes the people who will do the daughters, the sons programs, the motherhood, the fatherhood programs, to get that healing starting to go in the community and in the forest. And so this thing around forgiving, the elders, they told us, our only hope to be free of the intergenerational trauma is to forgive the United States government for what it did. And no lawsuits. Because it's very difficult to forgive and sue somebody. Forgiveness is what we need to do. That was one of the gifts that was in the book, Forgiving the Unforgivable. That many years ago, they had the insight to know that, in these 4 directions of forgiveness. This is your normal forgiveness. I step on your toe, hey, I'm sorry, forgive me. That's the normal one. The second one is forgiving the unforgivable. This is like sexual abuse, those types of forgiveness. The one that's even more difficult than that sometimes is the forgiveness of self. You ever do something, just something stupid and dumb? You ever do it? And you can't reverse it? And you carry that around. Feel shame, re-shame, think about it, and it affects so many things. The forgiveness of self. And then this is the one of the United States government, forgiving them to set their spirit free. So we're going across the United States now this year, preparing communities on how to. The documentary is turning it all over the place. People are seeing that. It's bringing up that hurt, bringing things up. I mean, you ever have this this feeling like you feel weird or bad because you weren't taught the language? That's intergenerational. We should have been taught that damn language. We should have. Ceremonies, we don't know what ceremony to do. That's that ancestors' willing type of forgiveness and things that we deal with. So, if you watch our website, we got the Great Recovery. We released the document. If you look at our website on the right-hand side, we are making a major push to get President Obama to make an apology to the Native people on behalf of the United States government role in the boarding school. Recognize, acknowledge, forgive, and change. We need to have that acknowledged. Canada did, Australia did, we have not. There's a petition you can sign. We will be announcing a mass effort for us to send letters to the White House. We're going to bombard them with thousands of letters requesting President Obama to make that. So pay attention, and you can really help us. Then we're putting together a Healing the Healers gatherings. Who do our healers go to? Those of you who are counselors, who do you go to? You're human, you hurt, you want to cry, but there's a lot of rules on who you can go to. They won't let you go. So we got to heal the healers, and then we are now selecting a Truth and Forgiveness Commission. We'll be going across the United States. We're getting our doctorate level people, our researcher type people gathered. That when you hear the stories of what happened here in Washington and in Oregon, we have to have that story told, and we've made arrangements with the Smithsonian that once the commission report is done, that we're going to work on school curriculum. That this story will not be taught in history anymore. This is a part of history. This did happen to us, but we don't want it to happen again. And we have to tell our children so that they understand why we adults, some of us, why we are weird. So that they have that understanding so that we all can heal together. So I want to thank you for allowing me to share what has been given to us so far. And I know we're just a little bit behind schedule, but thank you for staying over. And We'll see you again. But there is going to be a brief training here, and watch our website in May.
All right. Thank you, Don. Let's give Don a hand. I want to thank everybody again for being here today. I think this is really great for our community to have experiences and trainings like this to help us to heal, to develop more harmony and peace so we can be successful. So thanks.